Hello everyone, welcome back to Uncertain Release, and today I'm going to take advantage of this day of rain and not too hot of weather to, take a recording of a video that I've been writing and I've been working on for a few days now, and I've also taken your sound concerns to heart. Now I have a microphone into the shot, so hopefully the sound is going to be alright. You might hear thunder outside because, well, we are in the middle of a thunderstorm crisis, I would say, and that gives me the opportunity to, stay outside, make these videos. So today we're going to talk about the camera. You've read the title of the video, you're not dumb. You know that we're talking about the Nikon D300, and some of you might have questions on why I bought a D300, especially when I already have cameras like this, which is a Nikon D700, which is basically the same thing, just full frame instead of APS-C. And I love the D700 very, very much. So if you have questions and concerns of why I bought a D300 when I have this already, well, I hope this video will be able to clear some things out and also give you the idea of how good D300 is, because it is damn good. Let's start off with the reasons why I picked up the D300 in the first place. And the reasons that I did this is for the next video, which will come, I don't know when it will come, when I will find the time to do a proper comparison between these two. But basically, a few weeks back, I did a video about the Nikon D60, and a few of you asked in the comments to do a proper comparison between CMOS and CCD sensors to see if there was really, a reason to get a CCD sensor in the first place, or if the, things about all the CCD sensors are true and we should get them instead of CMOS, those kind of things. And I was also putting myself through those questionments, I would say, and I'm gonna say I can't really answer that question yet. I need to do more testing. But one of the things that I didn't want to do was to compare apples with oranges, and I didn't have a camera that would be, compared really well to the D60 in a way that I think it would make sense. A lot of the thing that comes into image processing and color science and stuff like that generally doesn't come from the sensor itself, but it comes from the image processor and how the manufacturer of the camera wants the image to look, how they are fine-tuning the colors and stuff like that. So it really, most of the heavy lifting when it comes to color science doesn't come from the image sensor itself, but from the processor, and it's heavily dependent on when the camera has been released. What was the manufacturer going for when they released that specific camera. And so, when I want to compare the D60 with another camera, I can't compare that to any of my Fujifilm cameras because it's not the same time period, it's not the same manufacturer, and even though they are both APS-C and one is CMOS, the other is CCD, I can't do a proper comparison with it. I could do it with my dad's. I can borrow it from him. My dad's D7000, but it's the same thing. Nikon was going for a very different thing in 2010 compared to what they were going for in 2007, 2008. So I can't really compare them, in good faith. I still had the D700, but the D700 is a full-frame camera. I didn't want to, compare an APS-C with a full-frame camera. It could put a whole lot of the type of concerns on color science, other than just, they are from the same time period, they are from the same manufacturer and stuff like that. So I wanted to have a 12 megapixel APS-C CMOS camera because there have been a few of these, and APS-C 10 megapixel CCD cameras have coexisted on the market with 12 megapixel APS-C CMOS, and so there's a number of cameras that have the APS-C CMOS sensor, but a lot of those cameras are entry-level cameras that I do not have much of an interest in. So there's the D100, the D5000, the D90. The D90 is a pretty okay camera. The problem with the D90 is it's $150 between those lines. It's rarely at 150. Generally, it's capping at about $120. And I didn't want to spend the money on such a camera, even though it's the best one out of all the cameras that I have talked about so far. And the reason for that is I know that it is a camera that I wouldn't use that much. And since I won't use it that much, well, no point in dropping a huge amount of money on such a camera. Now, another thing was that I could have gotten a D5000 for about $50. I think it was 55 euros on MPB or something like that. And yes, it's a pretty cheap price to get that sensor that I want to do that comparison. But again, it's spending money on a camera I would probably not use again, because functionally it's very identical to the D60 that I already have, just it have a weird flip screen. But it was not a camera that I was really passionate about. But then I remembered that another camera that has that 12 megapixel APS-C CMOS is the D300, and so I started looking at them, realized that since they have the very similar body to the D700, I could use the same batteries, could use the same cards, I could use even the same grip on it, so I would have kind of a reduced costs of operation of that camera. And that since it has the sensor that I want, I have two reasons to get it. The thing that I needed to get, the thing that I needed for me to get one was a good enough price. And I was looking at MPB because on the used market in France, D300s are generally overpriced. They are generally in the $200, 200 euros, sometimes more. So I think that people are a bit delusioned about the D300, but I was looking at MPB and there was around the $100 mark, and I was okay paying that much initially. But then at the same time, I ended up waiting. I saw one for 43 euros, and I wanted to get it. I put it into my card, and between the moment I put it into my card and I, went to pay, went to checkout, someone had bought it already, so I couldn't get it. But it put the idea in my mind that I could get a D300 for really, really cheap. So I waited and waited and waited about 2 weeks. And at that moment, another one popped out. This specific D300, okay. This specific D300, well, cost me about 59 euros. And, I have the experience of very cheap professional or semi-professional cameras. One very good example of this would be the Nikon D200. I've made a review of that camera already. And the thing with the D200 is I paid around $100 for it, and I think that all of those, euros went into the build quality, the autofocus system, and the fact that it shoots 8 frames per second. Because all the rest is either not great or straight up bad. And I thought that the D300 would be kind of the same thing. When it is cheap, generally there is a reason for it. And so I thought, well, it is the same body, same construction, same autofocus system as the D700. So when I'm paying $60 for that camera, I was thinking that I was paying for, the build quality, the autofocus, and that the sensor in it would be pretty much garbage, right? So I got the camera, in the intention to do that comparison, maybe use it as a little backup for my D700 when I want to, and not use it much more than that. And then I tested the camera, and then I realized that the sensor in it was actually very good. Like, to put numbers on that, okay, when I did my first editing session with the pics from the D300, I realized that there was about a stop of difference when it came to shadow pulling, and in the DP review made this comparison. I mean, they didn't make the comparison. I went to see the articles about both the D700 and the D300, and the D700 in DP review could pull shadows about 6 stops, and a D300 can do that for about 5 stops. which is, it sounds like one stop difference is a bit of a lot, and really in practice it's not. I'm very rarely pushing 5 stops of shadow detail. So yeah, And for the highlights, they are actually pretty much the same. The D700 can pull down about 5.5 stops of shadow detail, while the D300 can pull down 5. So half a stop of shadow detail, of highlight detail, sorry. So pulling down highlights by 5.5 or 5 stops, honestly, you won't see the difference unless someone tells you to look specifically at the slider in Lightroom, and or Capture One for me. But my point here is to say that there isn't much of a difference when it comes to dynamic range in both of those cameras. Yes, the D700 is better than the D300 by about a stop for the shadow side of things, but otherwise both cameras are extremely usable. It's not like the D2H. The D2H, the sensor on it, well, I'm never able to pull 5 stops of shadow detail. 2, if I'm lucky, if I'm in correct conditions with a low ISO setting, maybe I can pull 2.5, maybe 3 times, 3 stops, sometimes, and it's not always. 5 on a D300 with a sensor that has 3 times more pixels than D2H and same size. That's actually pretty good. Now, of course, the D700 being a full-frame camera will have another big advantage over the D300, and that's noise. So when noise, we need to talk about ISO ranges and settings and which is good, which is not. Basically, the D700 can go from 200 to 6400 natively, and if you go into the extended ISO ranges, which I wouldn't advise you to do generally with a Nikon camera, but the D700 can go from 100 to 25,600. The D300 is a lot more limited in that. So natively it goes from 200 to 3200, so about a stop lower than the D700, but it doesn't have like that second high setting in the extended ISO range that the D700 has, that I wouldn't use anyway, but it doesn't have it. So the extended ISO range on the D300 is only 100 to 6400. Now, how does it compare, in practice? In practice, what I've seen is that there is almost exactly one stop difference. Meaning that if I'm taking a picture at ISO 800 on the D300, it looks exactly the same. Like the amount of noise is exactly the same as a picture that I would have taken at ISO 1600 on the D700. Lots of hundred in that sentence. But basically, that means that in lower light situations, you could push the D700 further. You would have a broader range of values which you can use when it comes to ISO in D700 compared to the D300. Now, that being said, I'm mostly shooting during the day, okay? So generally my range of ISO is 200 to 800 generally. And if we take that into account, well, a D700 at ISO 1600 looks super fine to me. I never had any problem with the D700 at 1600 ISO. Generally, I can push the D700 to 3200 and it's still clean. That's about it. There's not much more to say about it, besides the fact that the D300, it has reduced ISO performance compared to the D700, but other than that, for most people, it wouldn't make that much of a difference. I've even shot the D300 in lower light situations, and even then the noise wasn't too obnoxious, and I was able to put it down through some noise reduction. I didn't use any noise removal AI tool or anything like that. I do not have access to those tools yet, so, I went, the old way with the D300 and with like very basic noise reduction. I was very happy with the results. So I wouldn't say that it's a much inferior camera than the D700. And on top of that, D300 has very real advantages over the D700. So we haven't talked about, the burst speed and the autofocus and stuff like that. But basically, if we are talking about the maximum burst rate of those cameras, they are identical. You need to use the grip with either an ENEL4 battery pack in it or uh, AA batteries, and you will be able to shoot 8 frames per second with both of these cameras. But if you don't have the grip and you just want to shoot the camera in CH mode, maximum burst rate, the D700 will do 5 frames per second and the D300 will do 6. It's a little bit faster, not that much, but that can make a difference, especially when we are going around these low burst rates values. 1 more frame per second could be the difference between a shot that is good and a shot that is not. So, there is a difference. And since they both have the same autofocus system, there is also the fact that since it's an APS-C frame, well, you have better coverage. You have better coverage of the APS-C, of the autofocus points on your frame. So if you have a subject that is going left to right on your image, well, you will be able to track it much better with the D300 than on the D700, which has its points much more concentrated in the center of the frame. When it comes to the actual ergonomics, they are the exact same. It's the exact same thing. The D700 has one advantage over the D300, and it's that you can remap, you can put to a function button the ability to live view toggle. And you can't do that on a D300. It's not in the list of things that you can assign to a button. So you have to go through the drive dial and go to the LV setting to get into live view. But other than that, these two cameras are identical in handling and capabilities, I would say. So even the buffer is the same. It's about 17 RAW files or something like that. It really is a very good camera. I don't have anything, wrong to say about the D300. Yes, it's not as good in a high ISO thing than D700, but really, most people wouldn't even notice. And one of the biggest thing about the D700 sensor is the color science. And since those two cameras were released at the same time, now I'm gonna try to match those two color science as well. And when we're looking at at one point, I shot the D700 and the D300 side by side for something. Like I was on a hike, and I edited the images of both cameras at the same time, and I couldn't tell if that was on D700 or D300 because the colors were the exact same. And I use the same lenses sometimes, so even though there is an APS-C crop on the D300, I wasn't able to tell if that was a D700 or the D300 at low ISO. It was the exact same thing. So now that leaves us to the the value kind of thing. The value that the D300 is giving you, especially at that kind of price, it's insane. I have nothing else. It's just insane. I was thinking that the D700 was a very good value camera because for about $300, you could get a camera that has a full frame sensor with very good performance and a top tier color science. And then the D300 came in and is like, hey man, I have all the same thing except I'm not full frame, I'm APS-C. I have one stop different in noise, and that's about it. And what's the difference? I cost 5 times less. That's insane. That for anyone starting out, for example, a D700 at $300 could seem like a good investment, but not everybody has the money to spend $300 on a camera. Well, I would say that everybody starting in photography would be willing to spend $60 on a camera. And if $60 is able to get you this, well, man, I don't know what more do you need to start out. Like, this is probably the best beginner camera ever when it comes to bang for buck. I would say it's insane. I have no words really for how good this camera is when it comes to price to performance. You have a top tier autofocus system. You have a very good image that you get out of that camera. You have especially good ergonomics. Like the grip it's the same thing as the D700. So far the D700 has been my top 2 camera when it comes to ergonomics. And that says something. I put a lot of focus on the ergonomics of the camera, and I think that for the amount of money, if you like, let's take the perspective of people that would be looking at D300. So maybe you don't have a camera yet. You're looking at the D300 and you're thinking maybe it could be a good deal. Yes, it is. If you were reluctant on getting a D300 for X or Y, get it. I don't have no other way to put it. If you already have a D300, is it worth it to get a D700? I would say that those two cameras working side by side are where they are the best, where they shine the most, because you have two cameras that use the same lenses, same batteries, same cards, same accessories. The grip is the exact same, and they have the same capabilities, same autofocus, same resolution, same color science, same type of file that you have to edit afterwards. Really, the having these two cameras side by side is a hell of a kit if you are shooting something like sports or something like that on a budget. Because, for example, to get a D300 and a D700, those two, I paid €305 for the D700. Keep in mind, for those that will come in the comments say, yeah, but you bought one with a defect. Yes, I bought a D300 with a defect, and the only defect that D300 has, both my D700 and my D300 were bought with about 30k clicks on them, so very low shutter count. The defect that MPB listed on the D300 I bought was there was some moisture under the back screen, which I honestly can't see. I can't see it. And the reason I can't see it is because the D700 I bought had the exact same defect and was discounted the exact same way the D300 was, and this was still 5 times more expensive. Anyway. Okay, as you can see with that screen in front of me, I'm currently editing the video, and I just realized that I'm speaking a lot of bullshit at one point. I'm talking about doing a setup with the D300 and D700 and 2 cameras and several lenses and think about the grand, but that's not what the D300 is about. So I decided to, let myself go with a much more humble approach when it comes to the D300, like a possible D300 kit. And especially with the D300 I got myself, at $60, you can add maybe a 55 to 200, which will cost you about $80, I think it is. And for $140, something like that, you already have like a setup that can do a lot of things. And if you add things like the 35mm f1.8 DX, for example, which is extremely affordable, you can get into portraits and street photography. There is also very, very affordable APS-C wide-angle lenses like a Sigma 10 to 20mm or something like that. If you want to go a little bit longer, there is even like lenses like 70-300s if you want to do some wildlife with it, which is totally doable with the D300 in my opinion. And you can stay well below $200, $300 maximum with like a camera which is super solid, 3 to 4 lenses, and maybe some battery backups, camera, memory card backups and stuff like that. And you can really have a solid kit for very low budget. And that low budget doesn't mean that you are, sacrificing anything really important like ergonomics, build quality, having a solid camera all around. And I think it is a very nice thing about the D300 that you can do that with a camera in 2023. So yeah, my initial rambling about more than $1,000 kit with a D700 inside it and stuff like that may apply to some people, but I don't think it's really relevant to the topic that we have right now. So back to past me, I was a bit of an idiot, and back to the video. Now, I think it's time for the conclusion, right? The D300, is it worth getting as a D700 user? Yes, it doesn't cost you a lot. You can use it alongside your D700. You're good to go. Is it worth getting if you don't have any camera and you're looking at an entry-level camera to get you started into photography? I think it's really hard to beat the value that the D300 is giving you, because besides the fact that it's a camera that's made for action shooting, it's also a camera that can put some good glass on it and get some decent portraits, some good event shooting, some very nice photos, even on landscapes even. So, you know, is the D300 a good buy? I think, honestly, it's the best value for the dollar camera I've ever bought. And I'm not a stranger to buying things where I have, a good value for my money. I have bought a D7000 with a 35mm f1.8 for about $200. That was so far the best deal I've ever made. This for €59, it tops it off. No questions asked. It really, really does. There is the little thing about the D300S. Is it worth getting the D300S over the D300? Answer would be no to me. Except if you absolutely want to get SD cards in, because the D300 doesn't have an SD card port. Well, guess what? Guess what type of card I am using in my D300. Yes, I'm using SD cards in it. Just get that adapter. It costs you $10 or something like that. If you don't want to use SD cards because you think that they will fail, well, use a CF card, mate. What more can I say about it? Yeah, okay. I think I've rambled enough about the D300. Maybe you have taken the grasp of how much I love that camera and how much of a good value that camera is. I will leave you with a sample gallery, as usual, of the photos I've taken with the D300 in the last few weeks I've had that camera. This is much more of an initial review, initial impression of the D300 more than, a full-on review, because I don't think I would be able to do a review in such a short time. Although, to be fair, I've had a D700 for about a year now, and besides the sensor size, these two cameras are identical. So when it comes to learning the menus, where the buttons are, how good the autofocus is, well, I already knew that from the get-go going in. I didn't have to learn anything. So, maybe I have much more of a insight of what the D300 is than if I was going in fresh without using a D700 before, but I guess I'll do a long-term review of the D300 because that's a camera that I'm going to continue using a lot, I think. Alright, on this note, I'm gonna, as I said, leave you with a gallery, and I'm gonna now get on to work on the next video, which is CMOS versus CCD sensor comparison, because now I have a camera that can do it. Alright, see you in the next one, guys. Have a good day, week, month. I don't know when I will upload the next video, but anyway, have a good one.
Creatures of my dreams.